Today is Monday, August 31st, and today's session is really centered around introducing Blackboard Ally at Triton College, talking about its uses and benefits to both students and faculty, and then answering any questions that you might have about it. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Again, my name is Sam Karell. I'm an accessibility strategist at Blackboard, and I will be leading today's session. I'll also be moderating any questions, so feel free to ask questions as I'm talking or put questions in the chat. I'll check in periodically just to see if anything's come up, but all that to say, don't feel like you have to wait to hold your questions until the end. And then to avoid any feedback or echoing during the call, I do ask that you just keep your mic muted if you're not actively speaking. Again, feel free to come on the mic if you do have questions or to use that chat feature. I'll be checking the chat as well. To talk a little bit about today's agenda and what we'll be discussing together. Really, the goal is to introduce you to Ally and to talk about two of its primary functions, which are alternative formats of course content to students and feedback about accessibility to faculty. We will also take you into a demo environment as well, so you'll have a chance to see some of those features in a course environment just to get a sense of the user perspective. But really, Ally at a high level is aimed at doing a couple of things. So it is a product that integrates into your Blackboard environment, and it's really designed to help with usability, quality, and in particular, accessibility of content within courses. It does this a couple different ways, but primarily Ally is taking content and it's identifying accessibility barriers to that content. It's providing faculty some step-by-step guidance on how to improve content based on those barriers. And then it's giving an overview of how accessible courses are to faculty. Ally is also providing alternative formats to file content and making them available to students. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but a couple of examples of those alternative formats are things like an audio version for listening or an HTML version of course content that might render a little bit more natively on something like a mobile device or cell phone. And really the goal there is to give your learners flexibility and choice for how they engage with that course content. Right now, Triton College is currently piloting Ally in about 1,000 courses, and we'll be making it available on a rolling basis over fall. So some of you maybe have already seen Ally or maybe have it in your course. Some of you might be a little bit new to it. But again, really the intent of today's session is to talk about why Triton College has decided to implement Ally and how it will hopefully support your students and then you as faculty as well. So I think a really big question going into today's session is why Ally and why right now? Certainly there's a lot going on right now in the world, and I know that this has been a very busy start to the academic year. So I do think it's a little bit important that we talk about why Triton College has chosen to adopt Ally and make it available across your courses going into this fall term. Really, the big reason why Triton College has decided to implement Ally is to support different learners and their needs. So when we talk about diverse learners, we're talking about a lot of different things. Our classrooms are full of diversity, certainly in terms of cultural, racial, or gender diversity, but also in terms of things like ability, family obligation, even age. Our students really are on their own unique educational journey, and 21st century learners have a lot of different facets in terms of their backgrounds, abilities, needs, and preferences. In terms of some of the populations that we're seeing grow at education institutions, we're seeing a lot more students that maybe have visible disabilities. This could be a student who is maybe blind, deaf, or hard of hearing, maybe has a mobility disability, and is using some sort of assistive device. Certainly we have a lot of students that are parents or have other family obligations. We're also seeing a growing number of international students at campuses. These might be students who are new to a culture of a place or maybe speak a different native language. Non-traditional students are also growing populations at our colleges. These could be students that are returning to school after a period away. These could be students that are maybe working jobs in addition to going to school. This could really, thinking about maybe you're a part-time student and some of the reasons why they're going to school, not full-time, but only maybe part of the time. We also have a lot of students that experience temporary disabilities. This could be a student that has an accident or an illness and maybe needs access in ways that they didn't before. We're also a lot of diversity in terms of device usage. Mobile usage on college campuses is increasing, and students are very reliant on their cell phones and mobile devices. I think this facet is particularly important to talk about in response to COVID-19 and the move to remote instruction. And talking to a lot of students, they really are using their cell phones and mobile devices more than ever to engage with course content. And a lot of that content wasn't necessarily designed to be usable on that type of device, which can present pretty unique access barriers to students. We also have a lot of students that are first generation. These could be students that are perhaps the first in their families to seek higher education and maybe need unique support around how they engage with the college or university setting. Certainly lifestyle can be a factor into learning. A lot of students are commuting to and from school, maybe not a ton now, but certainly prior to COVID-19, we were talking to a lot of students that were perhaps commuting long distances to and from class. Again, these could be students that have family obligations or are maybe working jobs in addition to going to school. And then a lot of our students have invisible disabilities. These are disabilities that you might not see, like dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, and depression. And sometimes these students aren't students that are requesting accommodations, so they could very well be encountering access barriers in a course, and you might not know it. But all that to say, these diverse needs really do factor into learning differently, and it becomes essential to consider these factors to provide access to students for their success and for positive outcomes. So some of the ways that we see these differences play out in the learning environment really are through interaction desires, the actual learning environment itself, and devices. So when we talk about interaction desires, some students' needs play out in how they prefer to engage with courses and content. So does a student want the ability to listen along to content, or do they need to see it so that they can highlight or annotate that content? A lot of students report liking the options to do both or to be multimodal. Student needs also factor into their actual learning environment. Again, thinking about COVID-19, a lot of our learners are going to class at home instead of school, maybe for the first time. And even for our digital natives, learning how to engage in a virtual learning environment is not always intuitive or without its challenges. And then again, even device plays into factors and needs. For example, I work with a college district in the state of Texas, and a lot of their students have shared that they, not necessarily out of preference, but out of need, don't have access to a laptop or desktop at home and really are relying on cell phones and mobile devices to engage with course content. And all of these facets and the way that they play into the interaction desires, environments, or devices that students are using mean that access barriers in the learning environment really do affect everyone. So this image here you're seeing on the screen is of a scanned or image-based PDF. Probably pretty common to see this in a course. Usually you'll see this when someone takes and makes a photocopy of something like a journal article or a chapter in a book. In terms of the accessibility of this scanned or image-based PDF, this could present a couple of accessibility challenges to different types of students. If you have a student in your course that is maybe relying on assistive technology like a screen reader to read out content because perhaps they're blind or low vision, having a document like this is going to be a pretty hard stop barrier because this document is image-based. There's no text for that screen reader or assistive technology to pick up on the document to read aloud to the student. Certainly, if you kind of take a closer look at this document, you'll also see things like The font is really crooked and blurry in some places. Margins are crooked and cut off. There's that big kind of gutter or kind of black space down the middle of the scan. And all of this really impacts the usability and quality of the document. Interestingly enough, when we look at studies on accessibility, it really supports that there is a pretty large overlap between usability and access. In a 2017 study, a group actually looked at accessible websites and found that when they provided accessible content on those websites, for all users, including those with disabilities, it actually improved the ability to retain information, engage with that content, and complete tasks more quickly. And when we look at this scanned document, it might be easy to see why that might be the case. So this is really where Ally comes into play. And again, the goal here is to help faculty identify where some of those access barriers, like a scanned document that we just saw, could be present in the academic environment. And then to also give some options for students so that they have some of those different needs and preferences met as they're taking courses and engaging with content. So just really quickly, I wanted to share out a poll to get a sense of, for those of you on the call today, who here has actually seen Ally. So give me just a moment. I'm going to put a poll up here on the screen. But in terms of the options on the poll, option 1 is perhaps you are just hearing about Ally today and know very little about it. Option 2 is maybe you have heard of Ally and a general sense that it's used to create more accessible learning for different types of students. Maybe you've seen a demo or a video of Ally. Perhaps you're one of those faculty that actually have Ally already available in their course and you've been engaging with it. Or maybe you are someone that has actually had Ally in their course throughout summer and are maybe more of a super user. So I'll go ahead and start that poll. If you don't want to use the poll, feel free to also put your responses in the chat. All right. So I'll give it just another couple of seconds here, but it looks like we've got quite a few of you that are just hearing about Ally for the first time today. A couple of you that actually have a pretty good idea of what Ally is. Perhaps you're one of those that have it already in your course. All right, perfect. Thanks everyone for participating in that. So then talking a little bit about the functionality of Ally. Really, my goal for today is to talk about what you as a faculty member might experience and then what students in your course are going to see. So again, Ally is a tool that fits into the Blackboard learning environment. In terms of the workflow, really a big goal of ours is to not change anything that you or your students have to do to engage with some of the outputs like the alternative formats or the instructor feedback that it's providing. So in terms of this workflow, if Ally is turned on in your course, and again, for some of you, it might not be yet, really to make some of these things available, you are just going to go to your course and you are going to add content as you would in any other situation. There's nothing that you need to do beyond adding content to your course to start some of these processes. Just the act of adding content or changing content in a course is going to automatically start really one of two things behind the scenes. So as you add content to your course, Ally is going to take that content and it's going to compare that content item to an accessibility checklist. That checklist is based on what we call WCAG 2.1 AA standards. The WCAG 2.1 standards are a set of global digital accessibility guidelines that are pretty commonplace when we talk about access in the web or online environment. So again, the first thing that Ally is doing is it's taking that content and it's comparing it next to that checklist to try and see where there might be some accessibility barriers in that document based on some of those global digital guidelines. The other thing that Ally is doing to that content item is it's running it through a machine learning algorithm to really try and extract some of the semantic information out of that document. By doing that, Ally is really trying to do two things. It's trying to extract the HTML from that document to generate the alternative formats that it's making available to students. It's also doing a visual analysis to try and identify where in that document it thinks that those accessibility barriers are living based on that accessibility checklist. But again, all of this is happening behind the scenes, and there's nothing that you as a faculty member are going to need to do to start that process if Ally is available in your course. And then really, again, as that's happening behind the scenes, you as the instructor are going to see feedback provided on that content, and your students are going to automatically get some of those alternative formats made available to them. So starting with the student function or student-facing output of Ally, again, Ally is taking that instructor uploaded content, and for a variety of different file types, it's providing alternative formats and making them available to students. Before we talk about different alternative formats and how students might use and benefit from them, I think there are two really important things for me to share. One, Ally is never going to change the original document. So as Ally is creating these alternative formats, your original file is not going to be changed or altered. That is very much by design. We in the product team behind Ally feel very strongly that faculty as content owners should ultimately be responsible for making the decision on if they want to change the original file. So again, Ally is not changing any of that content. It's just generating alternatives to that content and making them available to students. The other important thing about the alternative formats is that while they are really intended for student use, they are also going to be made available to you as faculty. So you will always be able to see what formats your students are getting. In terms of those formats, your students, if they have Ally available in their course, are going to see a menu of options become available that is going to look very similar, if not identical, to the menu that you're seeing up on the screen that says download alternative formats, and then gives a list of different format types to choose from and download. For the most part, this menu is going to be fairly consistent by design. So again, if students have Ally their course, this menu of options is going to look pretty similar course to course and content item to content item. So in terms of the first option here on the menu, Ally will take documents like a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation, and it will provide a tagged PDF version of that document. PDFs are, I think, a really valuable alternative format because they're a little bit easier to navigate with if you're using assistive technology. You do have students in your class that have accommodations or are maybe using assistive technology like a screen reader. A tagged PDF is going to give them a structured document that's going to be a lot easier to engage with. For lots of different types of learners, though, tagged PDFs can be beneficial. If you have students that maybe don't have access to Microsoft Office at home, they can still open up a tagged PDF and engage with it pretty easily without having Office Suite. And then if you do have a lot of us that are really relying on their mobile devices and cell phones to engage with content, a tagged PDF is a document type that does render natively in that device. So it's likely going to be a little bit easier to engage with if you're using a cell phone. In some cases, you will not see tagged PDF show up as the first option here. Instead, you will see what we call an OCR PDF. OCR stands for optical character recognition. And what this particular alternative format is doing is it's taking scanned PDFs. So again, that example we looked at earlier of that kind of low quality scanned PDF. It's taking content like that and it's running it through a tool called BLine Reader behind the scenes to provide an OCR'd or text-based version of that document. So in some cases, instead of tagged PDF, you'll see OCR'd PDF here, and that's just going to give your students a text-based version of a scanned or image-based document for them to engage with. The other option that you'll see up here on this menu is an HTML version. This is just a version of content that renders natively on mobile devices. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of trying to look at, say, a Word document on your cell phone and you're having to pinch in or zoom out or rotate the screen to try and capture all of the text in a readable way. An HTML version is just going to give your students a really nice, clean version of that content item that they can just see and visualize on the screen. The other alternative format that Ally will provide is an EPUB version. This is going to be for use on an ebook like an iPad, Kindle, or if your student has downloaded an e-reader to their device. I personally really like the EPUB version because I think it offers a lot of customizability to students with how they engage with content. You can do things like highlight and annotate text or add bookmarks to pages using EPUB. You can also do things like change the color of the font or the background color. In talking to a lot of students, they're really liking that dark mode where the perhaps the background is a darker color and the font's a lighter color. That's something that can also help with screen fatigue if you're someone that's looking at a computer screen or a cell phone all day. And then EPUB will also allow you to do things like change the size and the type of the font. So if you have students that need something larger print, or maybe a student that has dyslexia that really wants a sans serif font for easier reading, EPUB will really allow customizability to do all of that. The other version that Ally is going to provide is an electronic Braille version. This is going to give students what we call a Braille ready file or a BRF version of content for use on an electronic or refreshable Braille display. An electronic or refreshable Braille display is essentially a device that takes that BRF file and really creates Braille on the fly. It's going to leverage some tactile graphics that students can run their fingers over to read Braille pretty automatically. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with students that have Braille accommodations. My background is actually in disability services, and trying to fulfill Braille requests was always an area that was really challenging for my office. Depending on the size or the complexity of the textbook, manual Braille printing can sometimes take several weeks to complete. And so you would have students with accommodations would occasionally be waiting until several weeks into an academic term to actually get access to their textbooks. Having this Braille ready version is again going to give them that content pretty instantaneously. Yeah, Gretchen.
Hi, I have a question because I have this in all of my classes. So if I choose like the EPUB for Braille or the electronic Braille, it says that I would download it. So that document would just be for people who, needed an electronic Braille reader. I mean, I guess my question is this. If I have a student, I'm informed by Cass that I have a student who's blind, then I would go through my whole entire class doing this?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Gretchen. So you are correct. The electronic Braille version in particular is one that I see primarily being used to support accommodations. At this point in time, Triton College is not going to be replacing any accommodations with the alternative formats. That could change eventually, but my recommendation is if you do get a notification from Cass to continue working with them to fulfill those requests. They might use the electronic Braille to support the accommodations, but I would, to be honest, want to check in with their office before you replaced any accommodations with these alternative formats, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Gretchen. And then I see a question in the chat from TJ. Are there any copyright infringement concerns when reformatting publisher-generated course materials? Yeah, that's also a really good question, TJ. Oh, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to come on the mic, TJ?
No, I was trying to click my camera and I clicked the hand by mistake. Sorry.
Yeah, that is a really fantastic question. In terms of Ally and copyrighted materials, if you are uploading anything into your course environment from a publisher that has copyright protections embedded in the metadata of that document, Ally will see that in the properties and it will actually prevent alternative formats for being generated from that file. So that usually comes up when you're taking publisher content and putting it directly in. There could certainly be scenarios when you're uploading content that maybe didn't come directly from the publisher, but you have a pretty good sense that it is copyrighted. If you ever have concerns about a document like that, you as the instructor can actually turn off the alternative formats for a particular file type. So if you're maybe taking a chapter of a book that you know probably doesn't have those copyright protections in it, but it is copyrighted material, if you have concerns for that particular item, I would just say go ahead and turn off the alternative formats for that given document.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, of course. Okay, perfect. And then the other alternative format here on this menu is an audio version. So this is going to give students access to an MP3 version of course content for listening. In terms of the character limit, it's 100,000 characters, which roughly translates into about 2.5 hours worth of listening. It's pretty infrequent that I hear from faculty that they're meeting that character limit. I do think just to give a use case where this comes up the most is when you're taking maybe OER material and uploading it into your course environment. So if you're uploading like an entire chapter of a book from an open education resource, that could be an example of where you might hit that character limit. But for the most part, it's pretty infrequent that I hear that faculty are having to split out content to avoid hitting that 2.5 hours worth of listening. And then interestingly enough, the audio alternative format is probably the most varied in terms of student usage. Some institutions have really strong usage of the audio version. Some institutions, it's a little bit lower. But when we talk to students, they are really reporting that they are using the audio version in a very multimodal way. So pretty typically, they are downloading the audio version in addition to some of these other alternative formats, like a tagged PDF or an HTML version. And oftentimes they report that they're listening while reading along, or they're listening and going back and reading later. And then our newest alternative format is actually BLine Reader. This was an alternative format that was made available about, oh gosh, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it was actually about 4 months ago. This is giving students a version of course content that has a color gradient scheme applied to the text of the document. I'll actually show an example of this one here in a little bit when we go into a demo environment. I always find that this one's kind of hard to visualize until you actually see it. But essentially the goal of that color gradient scheme is to help kind of pull or guide the eye through the text of a document to facilitate easier reading experience. BLine Reader is actually the name of the company that developed this alternative format, and they developed this probably 4 or 5 years ago with the original intent of facilitating speed reading, and they got pretty immediate user feedback that from people with ADHD and dyslexia that having that color gradient scheme really helped them engage with the material. Interestingly enough, we did a pilot Reader back in the fall with about 30 different schools, and a lot of the students that participated in the pilot reported just that having that color gradient scheme, particularly for students that had dyslexia, ADHD, or other vision impairments, really liked having that color gradient to kind of help guide them through the text. And then the last alternative format that you might see is a translated version. This is going to take course content and provide 58 different language options to translate that content into. I think a really important note about this translated version is for most institutions, and I believe this is the case for Triton College, they have chosen to leave this particular alternative format off by default. The translated version is actually the only alternative format that you can turn off at a global level. And at this point of time, a lot of institutions have chosen to do that just because they don't love the idea of perhaps giving a translated version of course content in, say, a foreign language course. So it's very unlikely that you are seeing this on your menu of options just yet. We are expecting a release to come out from Ally that will actually allow institutions to customize the translated version on a course basis. That update is expected here in the next several weeks. So it is possible that you could have someone reach out to you once Ally is enabled in your course, asking you if you do want to make this translated version visible on the menu. But just a quick note is that it's unlikely that you're seeing this as an option right now. And then if I were a student, I would just select which of these alternative formats are going to work best learning needs, and then I would select that download button in the bottom right of the menu, and that would prompt a download. In terms of download speed, alternative formats generally take about 30 seconds to 2 minutes to download. I find that longer files and then the audio version sometimes take more in that 1 to 2 minute range, but for the most part, it's pretty immediate that you're getting access to these. The nice thing about a download is once you've completed a download, it actually will cache that alternative format in the Ally server. So the next time a student, even if it's a different student, goes to download that same alternative format, their access will be pretty instantaneous, and that download will render pretty immediately. The other thing I'll share about the downloads of the alternative formats is once a download is complete, students do not have to be connected to the internet to go back and access them. Even something like the HTML version, once you've completed that download, you really don't need to be connected by Wi-Fi beyond making that initial download. So if you do have students that are maybe taking courses at home and are reporting that they don't have consistent internet access, they will need to be connected for that initial download, but beyond that, they don't need to be connected to use any of these alternative formats going forward. The student-facing function of Ally. What faculty are going to get is what we call instructor feedback. And this is going to show up if you've got Ally enabled in your courses by the presence of these indicators or gauges next to your course content that are really meant to be educational around how accessible that content is. So you would essentially select the indicator, and then it would open up some feedback that looks similar to what you're seeing on the screen here. Ally is really going to tell you what the accessibility issues of that content are based on that accessibility checklist that we're comparing it to in that automated process. And then Ally is going to tell you as the faculty, in addition to what that accessibility issue is, how it impacts different learners in your course. And then it's also going to give some guidance on how to, if you want to, go into that original source file and fix or remediate that accessibility barrier. And really a goal here is to provide education and to create a change in behavior over time. Really our goal is that as you're seeing this feedback and learning a little bit more about some of these accessibility issues, when you go to create new content, you know some of the tips and tricks to create that content as accessible from the outset, instead of having Ally tell you to go back and fix things. And then I think a really important thing for me to note about the instructor feedback is it is only for instructors of a course. Students will not see this. So your students aren't going to see those indicators or gauges, nor will they be able to open up document feedback. The only thing students will get access to is the alternative formats. One thing I will share about the instructor feedback and its visibility to students, if you are ever sharing anything out in your Blackboard course and you're sharing your view, I have talked to a couple of faculty that have inadvertently revealed the presence of those indicators that way. In your Blackboard course and need to share something out and don't want students seeing those dials, go ahead and just switch to student view in Blackboard, and those indicators will disappear and will no longer be visible as you're sharing out your screen or your view. And then the other thing that Ally is providing to faculty is a course accessibility report. So again, students aren't seeing this, but essentially this report is giving you an overall insight into how a course is performing in addition to those individual content items. So this is going to give you a breakdown of how accessible content is in an entire course. And then it's going to give you a couple of different options or pathways to fix content. And really the goal of the course accessibility report is to make it a little bit easier for faculty to know where to start on making specific fixes. So instead of you going into your course and looking at all of those different content items and their scores and trying to determine where you might want to start, this report is really trying to give you a couple of different pathways that you could take to prioritize where you want to start making those fixes. So at this point, I'm actually going to take us into a Blackboard environment so you can see what this might look like in a course. as I'm doing that, I'm going to switch out my screen, but are there any questions that I can answer as I'm swapping things out here? All right. So give me just a moment. Things should be popping out now. All right, so we are in a demo course. This course might look a little bit different than your course environment, just based on how it was set up, but how Ally is going to function in this course is going to be exactly the same as your course if you have Ally turned on yet. So we are right now, we're in the instructor view. We know that we're in the instructor view because we're seeing these gauges or indicators appear next to content in the course. Again, these indicators are only visible to faculty in the course, and they're really meant to just prompt the faculty member to select the indicator to learn a little bit more about how accessible that content is. In terms of the indicators themselves, kind of operate on a traffic light approach. If you're seeing red, it means that there could be some significant accessibility barriers to that content. If you're seeing this kind of orange or yellow indicator, it means that there could be some barriers to some students in that content, but there could be other issues that are not going to be present for other types of learners. And then if you're seeing this green here, it means that the document is fairly accessible. So in terms of what you're going to see if you select that indicator and open it up, I apologize, it's because sharing out, it might take a beat longer than usual for this to load. In fact, let me actually just refresh it and see if I can jumpstart some movement here. I always love how things are a little bit slower when I'm screen sharing, which is exactly when I don't want things to be slow. All right, so we'll give it a second for the preview to load here. So we're looking at this this document that an instructor has uploaded in a demo course. You'll, for most cases, see the document that Ally is looking at in the middle of the screen here. And then going over to the right, at the very top, you will see the file name of the document that Ally is checking. So in this case, it's a Dalton's Theory of Atoms document. Under that, you will see the overall accessibility score for that document. So in the case of this document, it's got a 49% accessibility score, which is a moderate accessibility score. Under that score, you will see the primary issue that is impacting that score to be what it is. In the case of this document, is that there are images that are containing a missing image description or alternative text. If you are perhaps new and don't really know what an image description is, we do want to provide that context to you. So if you select the box that says what this means, it's going to tell you what an image description is. So again, an image description, or sometimes it's called alternative or alt text, is essentially a textual alternative for an image that is going to make it easier to connect images to their context. It's also going to be what is read aloud to a student that is using a screen reader. If you do have a student that is near low vision, if they don't have that image description and you have an image in a document, they are, without that description, are not going to get any relevant context as to what that image might be. So in addition to telling you what an image description is, we also do want to provide that information on why it might be important to include them with images and content. So again, it's going to help with context. In some cases, it might even facilitate easier searching, particularly in larger documents. And then again, if you do have students with visual impairments, having that image description is going to be really critical to their learning. And then Ally wants to give you some step-by-step guidance on how to go into perhaps this source file here, this Dalton's Theory of Atoms document, and add descriptions in. So if I select this box here that says how to add descriptions, it will let me choose from a couple of different authoring softwares. We'll just select Microsoft Office 365. And then it's going to give you some step-by-step guidance on how to open up that original document, and in this case, add in those image descriptions. For the most part, we keep the guidance here pretty short and sweet. You might notice that some fixes are going to have more steps than others, but in the case of an image description, once you know how to do it, it's a pretty easy fix to make. If you want to save the guidance that you're getting here so that the next time you go and create content with images, you've got some resources on how to add those image descriptions in. You can also print the instructions here at the bottom. I talk to a lot of faculty that will print and save to their desktop or actually physically print out and just kind of create their own little micro-learning document. Again, the next time they're creating content, they've just got something that they can refer back to help them include some of these accessibility features into content. If you do decide to make changes to that content based on the guidance that you're getting here, there's this box down below that will allow you to drag and drop new content or open up your files and swap that content out. And essentially by uploading files into this box here, it's going to replace the old version with the newer, hopefully more accessible version. I, as a best practice, typically recommend to swap files out here. It just keeps it nice and clean to where you're not ending up with multiple versions of documents with varying accessibility. Having said that, there are certainly going to be situations where it's maybe appropriate to keep both versions. But if you do want a nice clean way of swapping out the old version with the new version, you can certainly do it here through the instructor feedback. And then the other thing that Ally is going to try and do for a couple of issues is highlight where in the document it thinks that the issue is. So really, as much as possible, trying to take the guesswork out for you as faculty and figuring out where the barrier could be in the document. So for images that are missing a description, there's this 3 at the top here. And if I use this up-down navigation, it's just going to put some boxes around all of those images that it thinks should have a description. So again, as much as possible for a couple of different issues, going to try and really highlight where in the document that barrier is. The other thing that I will point out is this All Issues button to the right of the accessibility score. If I select that, it's going to give me a list of issues that are impacting the document based on that accessibility checklist. To keep things scalable, we try and highlight the most significant issue first, but if you do want to really get that score up to 100% or tackle multiple issues in the document, you can select that All Issues button to get a list of what some of the other barriers are. In the case of this document, images missing a description is the primary barrier. If you spent time fixing those 3 images, it would actually increase your accessibility score from 49 up to 94%. There are also some contrast issues within this document. If you just spent time fixing contrast issues, it would take that accessibility score from 49% to 53%. And the reason why the scores there are a little bit different is we do weight the scores based on how severe the accessibility issue is or how many of a certain type of issue are present in that document. If you fix both of these issues, it is very likely you will see that score go from 49% up to 100. And then if you do want to tackle that other issue, you can go ahead and select the issue that's listed out here. So in this case, in addition to images missing a description in this document, there are also text fragments that have insufficient contrast, where the color of the text is maybe not sufficient enough for the color of the background. If I select that, it's going to swap out the guidance I'm getting here so I can learn what insufficient contrast is and how to fix it. It's also going to put that red box around all of the instances where that text fragment has insufficient contrast. So it's highlighting that really kind of light gray text on that white background, and it will highlight where in the document all of those text fragments are. So that's the instructor feedback. The other thing that I wanted to show you is that course accessibility report. In Blackboard, it's a little bit buried, so I find that unless you're told where to find it, it's not always going to intuitively pop up. The accessibility report is going to be under Course Tools. It should be that first option that shows up there that says Accessibility Report. And again, it's going to give you not just that individual document or content score, but it's going to give you an overall score for this course. So for this Post-Impressionism 101 demo course, the overall score for all of the content in that course is 46%. So it's taking all of those documents and content and aggregating it to give you that average. And then below that, you can get a couple of different pieces of information from this report. It will give you a breakdown of the total number of content items in the course. So for this demo course, there are 13 different content items. It will give you a breakdown of how much of a certain file type comprises the overall number of content items. So if I hover over different parts of this circle here, it'll tell me that there are, for example, 6 PDF documents out of 13 content items, or 3 Word documents out of those 13 content items. Some faculty I work with will really use this to decide maybe they want to start making fixes of a certain content type, just knowing that, for example, PDF content is the most prevalent content type in this course. You can also get a list of issues down here. So if you are given some guidance on where to start, or know that you want to start with a certain issue, it will list issues out by severity of accessibility barrier. And then you can actually drill into a specific issue. So in this case, we'll document as contrast issues. If I hit this right-hand arrow, it's going to give me a list of all of the files in my course that have been impacted by contrast issues. And I can actually open up the instructor feedback by selecting the indicator here to get all of that information on what a contrast issue is and how to fix it. And then lastly, if you maybe aren't quite sure where you want to start, there are a couple of built-in pathways to this report. So to the right of where it's giving you that, that breakdown of course content by type, there's 2 pathways here that you can follow. The first pathway is content with the easiest issue to fix. My colleague Krista likes calling this the easy button. And if you select start here, it's going to give you a list of files within this course that are based on the issue impacting the document, are going to be pretty easy for you to fix with some pretty minimal instruction. So some issues that you might see show up here if you were to select this easy button are images missing a description, contrast issues within things like Word documents or PowerPoint presentations. If you've got a Word document that's missing a heading structure or a table that's missing headers, those are some of the issues that you could see prioritized to fix. You select that content with the easiest issues to fix workflow. If you are someone that's a little bit more score motivated and you just want to see that score go up in as much as possible, there is also a pathway to fix low scoring content that if you select is maybe not going to give you the easiest issues to fix, but will give you issues that if you spent some time fixing them are going to have the most impact on raising both the document score and the course score. So again, if you're not quite sure where you want to start, that's going to give you a couple of different pathways to follow to help you prioritize where you can begin fixing content. So then going back here, oops, I accidentally got out of my course here. I'm going to actually switch over to the student view so you can see what a student is going to see if they've got Ally available in their course. So I'm going to go into the student preview, and really the biggest difference that I'm going to see here is that those indicators or gauges are no longer apparent or visible. What is available to the student is this icon that's of an A with a drop-down arrow. If I select this, this is going to give me a list of those alternative formats for me to select. And then let me find one. Let's see this one here. I was going to show you the BLine Reader alternative format. So if I'm a student, I would just select which one of these options works best. Maybe your students want multiple options, so they're downloading multiple alternative formats. I'll select that download. And this might be the first time that a download has been prompted for this particular alternative format, so it might take a second to load. or because I'm sharing, it might take more than a second. Try that one more time. All right. So this again is the BLine Reader alternative format. So it's taken that Dalton's atomic theory document that we were looking at in the instructor feedback earlier, and it's given me as the student an HTML version with this color gradient scheme applied to it. Again, HTML versions are nice just because they render natively on a mobile device. So if I was looking at this on a cell phone, all of this text would be fitting to the screen in a very readable way. And then I've got, as the user, a couple different options for color schemes I can apply to the text. So throughout the text, it's got this red and blue gradient that it's applied to all of the different words in the document. I can also change to a night mode. So if I, again, wanted to have a darker background color for whatever reason, I can do that here. But again, really the goal of the color gradient scheme is just to help pull your eye through that text a little bit more easily. So that's one example of the alternative format that a student could download there. And again, these are also available to you as faculty. So you will see that A with a drop down arrow next to it, next to your content, and you can get to that same menu of options to see what your students are seeing, or in some cases, maybe you might find some benefit in having access to those alternative formats as well. So while I'm here, are there any questions? And let me hop in the chat really quickly. Sorry, you're seeing the mini mirrors effect on the screen there. But I just want to make sure. So Dave asked, where was that report found again? So let me get back out of the student view. So we're back to the faculty now. So if I were looking for the course accessibility report, it's going to be under the left-hand navigation under the course tools section. And it will be accessibility report, which should be the first option that's available for you. And if I select that, it's going to open up that accessibility report. Did that answer your question, Dave? Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yes, you say that just some classes have the Alice program. So just to understand how this program is integrated to the Blackboard Collaborate, or we have to integrate it, download it ourselves as instructors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you want it now, Triton College is doing a pilot of this with about 1,000 courses. If you currently don't have it and want it, let me actually, I'll put the name of the person in the chat that you can request access from. I also know that Triton is going to just be making this available to all faculty here at some point. I don't have a go live date just yet, but more to come on that. It is possible that you will at some point just see this available in your course. But the person that's been leading the Ally adoption there at Triton College is Umberto Espino, the Assistant VP over at Technology and Innovation. I will put his email in the chat. If you don't have Ally right now and are interested in getting it sooner rather than later, go ahead and email him, and he will he'll go ahead and enable it for you in your course.
Thank you. But the way that I will know that I have it is going to the course tools, right?
Yeah, or just going to the course. If you're an instructor, you will see those gauges show up in your next course content. So if you're seeing that gauge in your course, that red or yellow or orange gauge, that's a really good indicator that you've got Ally turned on in your course.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Christopher, great question. So what browser would you recommend? I agree with TJ. I like using Chrome as well. That's typically what I use. You can use other browsers. I think the one that I have heard the most kind of trouble with is honestly Internet Explorer, but Chrome and Safari I haven't had any issues with. Yeah. And then just a couple of other things to share out with you just in terms of resources and next steps. Let me get my presentation back. Yeah, of course, Christopher. So we do have a user group. Yeah, TJ also adds Firefox is okay too. Explorer, unfortunately, you're going to encounter some issues there. So we do have a user group. At this point in time, there are about 850 institutions across the globe that are using Ally. We do have a very active user community. Anyone is more than welcome to join this community. We've got about 2,000 participants that range from faculty to centers for teaching and learning, to instructional designers, to students, to departmental leadership that are all actively participating in this user group. So again, if you are interested in signing up, you're more than welcome to do so. I will share the recording and this PowerPoint presentation back as a reference, so you'll have access to all of these links. But the user group is just a really great place to go and connect with other users to talk about how they're engaging with Ally and perhaps leveraging the instructor feedback or the course accessibility report to fix content. We also do have a site that's got some really great support materials, including many that are specific to faculty. So I'll go ahead and I'll put the link in the chat as well. At help.blackboard.com is our help site, and there's lots of, I think, really great information for faculty in terms of micro-learning documents, one-pagers. There are a couple of short videos for students and for faculty on Ally and so on. All of that is public facing, so if you see something you like and want to use it or adapt it, please feel free to do so. And then again, some of you already have access to Ally. Some of you will start seeing it in your courses over fall. If you do want it sooner rather than later, do reach out to Umberto and he will be more than happy to give you access to it in your courses. And then we will have another one of these sessions on September 8th. So next week, same time, same place on Tuesday. So if you have any colleagues that you would like to learn a little bit more about Ally, tell them to come on by and we'll be here having the same conversation. So I'll hang out for a couple more minutes just if there are any last minute questions, but I hope that this was helpful. And I apologize for the late start, but I really appreciate your participation today.